Hi everyone, welcome to Papo Embalado, the videocast brought to you by Valgroup. I'm Carlos Santos, and today we are diving into a critical question: who has been misleading us about plastics, and most importantly, why? We are joined by Dr. Chris DeArmitt, scientist and author of the book The Plastics Paradox. Let's get started. Hi Chris, hello again. Thank you to join us to our last episode of the videocast Papo Embalado.
Always a pleasure, thank you.
Oh, our pleasure to have you here with us and to clarify so many aspects and misinformation about plastics.
Thank you.
And this episode I'd like to ask you, there is a lot of misinformation circulating about plastic pollution. Mm-hmm. How has this information spread, and what are the main sources?
One of them is, for example, they said there will be more plastic than fish in the sea. That was a claim made by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
By 2050.
By 2050, right. And they at least cited some science, right? And they asked these scientists, is this true? And the scientists, both groups, they cited two different studies, and both of these groups of scientists said, no, it's not true. So there was one study saying, how much fish do you think there might be in the ocean? And they don't really know. All they know is how much plankton is in the ocean, which is the food for the fish. So nobody really knows the amount of fish in the ocean. And then they had to know how much plastic is in the ocean. And that number they definitely got wrong. They got it wrong by a huge amount. So this idea that there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean is 100% false. And it's been disproven by the BBC in England, by the CBC in Canada, and I have a whole webpage that completely destroys that idea. And what's worrying for me is anyone can make a mistake, right? You could make an honest mistake, and then you should say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. But these groups never do say that. I have never seen any of them come back and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, there won't be more plastic than fish, and take it back. And this shows that they're not credible. Right? If you were genuine and you really cared about the environment, you would say when you made a mistake, and you would. So their credibility is very low because they say things which are not true, and even when you prove it's not true, they don't admit it, and that's a problem.
And who stands to benefit from the push for plastic bans, and what economic interests are driving this narrative?
I don't know for a fact, but lawyers have told me that they know that the paper industry and the metal industry and the glass industry are paying to attack the plastic industry. And that would make sense, right? Because they're competitors. So it would be normal competition for the other companies to see, or the other industries to see this as a threat to them, and then to fund some attack to try to get the business back again. I think that would be normal business practice. I haven't got evidence of that myself, but I've talked to lawyers who say that they've seen with their own eyes that they know that that is happening.
And talking about narratives, some claims like we consume a credit card's worth of plastic every week.
Yeah.
And this have gained traction.
Yes.
How do such exaggerated statements affect public perception and also policy?
It does, because people think, oh my goodness, this is true. And that's the trouble. Now, in the old days, let's say you wanted to spread a story, you would have to pay for a full page in the New York Times, you'd have to go to magazines, you would have to get interviews. It would be a lot of work and a lot of money to spread nonsense. But now it is so easy to spread nonsense on the internet. You just make up a crazy story and poof, it goes viral. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just down to your creativity. So people are making hundreds of millions of dollars spreading complete nonsense. And even when you tell the truth, it never catches up with the lie. They did a study that a lie is 70% more likely to be retweeted than the truth. And think about that. That means I retweet to this person, and that person's 70% more likely to retweet the lie, and that person is 70% more likely. That means that the chance that a lie will go viral is infinitely higher than the chance that the truth will go viral.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And Chris, but let's talk about scientists. You're a renowned scientist. You're looking for the truth. you are independent, you have no interest in plastic. You told me that you are not even a big fan of plastics. You don't care. You just are looking for the truth about this material.
Yes.
But scientists often play a key role in shaping public opinion, but in some cases they have contributed to spread of myths about plastics. Why do some push for plastic bans despite evidence that contradict their claims?
Yeah. Some scientists are doing a terrible job. So it's been estimated that 90% of microplastic research is flawed and not valid. And that's true. I've seen that as well. And there's even been cases where people really cheated. So there was one scientific paper where they did a study on fish and microplastics, and somebody else went to the publisher and said, this is a fake, this is a completely made up. And those people, they retracted the paper, they had to withdraw the paper, take it away and say this is false. And these people then had, of course, shame and could suffer in the scientific community, because once you lost your credibility. And I think there should be more of that. There should be more of people being shamed for doing bad science and misleading people. There's another study where they said 100,000 pieces of microplastic per gram, that's this much, of fruit and vegetable, 100,000 or 200,000 pieces, which is completely insane. And I read that study. Nobody else reads the study, right? They just go with the headline. But I'm reading these studies. It's really boring work. I've got glasses now. I didn't have them before. So I read the study. They never detected plastic anywhere in that study. They took the fruit and vegetable, they dissolved it in acid, and then they looked for particles. They found some particles. They said, oh, it's probably plastic. Nowhere in the study did they detect plastic. And I wrote to the editors of the journal. It's an Elsevier journal. And I said, this is wrong. They say that they detected plastic, but nowhere in the study did they even look for plastic. They just looked for particles and assumed it's plastic, and it wasn't plastic. So, and then I went, and they didn't care. So then I went to Elsevier, the publisher, and they said they would investigate, and they never did. They never did anything. Completely fake. And that study is still out there. The World Wildlife Fund cited that study and said there's 100,000 pieces of microplastic with zero evidence, just made up.
Did you say that there are a lot of mercenaries around the world?
Yeah, it's the same as any industry. I mean, I'm proud to be a good scientist. I have a certain position, and you have a code of ethics, and you're very careful about your reputation and your morals, and you make sure that you back everything with evidence. But some people are not like that. I mean, there are good doctors and bad doctors, there's good dentists and bad dentists, and there's good journalists and bad journalists, and so forth.
But there is an interest behind it, an interest.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to get funding if you tell everyone they're going to die, right? If you tell everyone they're going to die from global warming, you get money. Some of these same people said we were going to die from an ice age a couple of decades ago. They said the next ice age is coming. The same people, some of them, we're going to die from freezing. And then they say we're going to die from too much heat. Then they say we're going to die from microplastics. They say we're going to die from BPA. It's all just nonsense. But it's so easy to get money when you say that there's a problem, because then the government just throws money at you to research it. At the moment, there's one organization called the ACC in America. They're spending $1 million to do microplastic research. And I said, why? I have 50 years of studies on my computer. I have all the answers. I've already paid for it in my taxes. And they said, I'll do it for you for free. I'll just show you the evidence. No. We're going to spend this money with our friends instead and pay to do everything again.
The real contributors to ocean pollution are often overlooked in favor of blaming plastics.
Right.
Why are plastics unfairly targeted in this conversation, and who benefits from that narrative?
Who does? I don't know. Because as we said, you find 3 tons of nets which cause damage to whales and turtles for 1 kilogram of consumer bottles and straws. So the consumer thing, which we all hear about, is not a problem, and the nets are. So maybe the fishing industry is doing it, because the fishing industry is the real problem. They're the ones causing the harm. They're the ones causing a huge amount, like more than 99% of the plastic is fishing nets, right? Which is left by them on purpose. They just abandon these nets. So maybe they are busy doing it. I don't know. Maybe they have, because it's a big industry. Maybe they said, we don't want to take the blame. We're going to make sure everyone else is distracted by a couple of straws.
Some people argue that plastics are a major cause of climate change. What evidence do we have that refuses this claim?
Well, first of all, the amount of CO2 to make plastics is 2%. So if you were worried about climate change, you would not be focused on plastics because 98% is coming from other things like iron and steel and cement. So you would be totally insane to focus on plastics if you were really worried about global warming. But even more than that, we discussed in a previous episode, plastics are actually reducing, totally net reducing CO2 by making cars lighter, making planes lighter, preventing food waste and insulating heat. So plastics is the last thing you would look at if you were worried about global warming because plastics is reducing CO2, not increasing it.
Why is it important to look at the full environment impact of materials rather than focusing solely on plastics?
Well, it's a bit like when you have children, right? You always hear one side of the story, and if you don't listen to the other side, you'll make a mistake, right? Because every child will come to you and tell, oh, he hit me, oh, but she bit me first. And it's like that, right? Anyone who only listens to one side of a story is just taking the easy path. Anyone who's responsible, who really cares about a better future, will spend a few minutes to look at the facts. And I'm not asking everyone, this book is for free in 5 languages, right? But you don't have to read the book. You can go to the website and I have a summary on 1 page for somebody who only has 5 minutes and they care about the environment. You can see the facts in 5 minutes. And that's all I'm asking from people, to not listen to the media, not listen to these green groups who make their money by telling you funny stories, but to really go and listen to what the science shows you, because everything I say has a link where you can go and check it yourself and see it's true. I've been doing this for 5 years and no one has found an error in any of my work yet.
All right. And how can the plastic industry collaborate with policymakers to push back against misinformation and develop more balanced, effective environmental solutions?
Yeah. What they need to do is make sure that we cut off access to the green groups, because they're not really green. They're telling a story that is counterproductive and increases harm. So we need to make sure that credible people are getting in front of policymakers, and people who have low credibility are not getting in front of policymakers. We need to make sure decisions are made on facts and not on feelings.
All right. Well, Chris, we come to the end of our episode. Would you like to let a final message? If you could complete the phrase regarding all the things we talked about, plastics, about the myths, about the misinformation, the bottom line is...
The bottom line for me is you can be for the environment or against plastics, but not both. Because if you're fighting plastics, you're increasing harm to the environment, and that's a scientific fact. So people should remember that. You could be against plastic if you think it's fun. You don't like plastic, I don't care. But if you think you're helping the environment by fighting plastics, you're wrong.
All right. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow Valgroup on social media to stay updated to the future contents. Until next time.